Before we get started, a special thanks to a member of ours, Jerry Mangona. He's a financial advisor. He provided some of the support so that we can do this coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference. If you'd like to join Jerry, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, coming to you from the porch of the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. That's right. It is time for the Mackinac Policy Conference. We're doing a bunch of interviews, talking to people, and getting a pulse on what some of the leaders of our region are thinking. I'm Jer Stays, and across the table from me,
Cheyenne Noserini.
So we're going to talk about things.
We are going to talk about things because I love policy.
That's a long time running joke inside because when we were doing a piece for Detroit Public Television a while ago, there was a little bit of a snippet. And somewhere on the internet is Cheyenne sitting there going, with her public policy minor going, I love policy.
I was probably wearing the same skirt I'm wearing now. Now that we're talking about fashion, the Mackinac Policy Conference is known for the seen and be seen in fashion. And Jer, you have quite the fashionable hat.
Yes. Actually, it is a straw Stetson.
See, when I hear Stetson, I immediately think back to my Western roots and cowboy hats. But this, my friends, is not a cowboy hat. Jer, why don't you tell them a little bit about your hat?
So this is a wonderful gift, and it is a straw. I don't know what the right word for this is. It's kind of reminds you of something out of 1920, like a barbershop quartet.
Right.
But a little classier. And I got to tell you, I think there's maybe one or two other hats of the same level on this island. I've gotten lots of compliments for it.
Yes, it is the hat of the conference, I want to say.
And to go with it, I'm wearing shirts that match all the rooms of the Grand, including a green and blue number right here. But enough with our fashion talk on Daily Detroit. There are a lot of stories to get into. In fact, at the end of the show, we're going to talk with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson about some plans with Title IX that are even possibly going to affect our fans of Detroit City FC, because one of the pushes is professional sports teams for women. So that's going to be really interesting. But before we get into that, there was a poll released this week from the Detroit Regional Chamber, and I'm always interested in these because I want to get a sense of how people are feeling. And polling, Shy, is very rare nowadays because it's expensive and hard to do.
It is. And also, not a lot of people answer their phones nowadays to unknown numbers.
Yes, this is very true. So I think we should go through some of the top lines. And of course, dailydetroit@gmail.com. We know that you're not shy about sharing things. And yes, we heard your feedback about roads, but that's for another day. I'm going to talk to Devin. When we want Devin to answer, we're going to let Devin answer for himself. But let's talk about this poll. Almost 73% say the economy is on the wrong track due to inflation. And inflation is the number one concern among people, followed by roads, which is all the way down to 13%. Roe versus Wade, and abortion made its first appearance, and then government leadership. What are some of your takeaways on this?
So one of my biggest things when I was reading the poll was that it's both Republicans and Democrats saying that we are on the wrong track. Mm-hmm. And it's at least people are agreeing on something.
I noticed a big difference in approval between President Joe Biden and Governor Whitmer.
Yes.
Governor Whitmer has nearly 50% approval, which is very strong for an incumbent, but Biden's down in the 30s. So you really have two different stories here, depending on who you are, where you're sitting in office. Another thing I will say is that it talks about economic stability, and the vast majority of Michiganders are about the same or doing better. So that's interesting, too. So inflation's going up, but still people are feeling pretty stable, according to this poll.
Yeah. One of the things, too, is that there has been drastic change in younger people leaving their jobs during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think going into the data, they call it the great reshuffling, but there was something you saw that was interesting.
So 12% of women have left the workforce for retirement or not being able to work right now, compared to only 7.7% of men.
I'd also put that with nearly 50% of voters aged 18 to 29 are in a new job. So there's been this whole thing of people leaving the workforce, and then the reshuffling really happened with younger people. Obviously, a lot of people change jobs, but if 50% change jobs, I think you have a big generational difference in how people are experiencing the economy, what they've decided that they're going to do. I even sense that in listeners, too. A lot of people have taken that job and shove it.
Yes. They even broke it down between those with a college degree and those without. So 32.1% without a college degree are in a new job compared to only 19.4% of those with a college degree.
Does that kind of echo things like we're seeing in the restaurant industry?
I
Like
think
servers anecdotally moving to, say, cannabis. That's something I've seen a lot of. Better hours, better pay.
Not having to deal with jerky people because most people are like blissed out when they're on
like
marijuana.
If you're a jerk at the cannabis dispensary, like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a jerk at the bar, of course. Come on, man. But really, at the dispensary? Really? You know, and I also am looking at the issues that are changing people's motivations to vote. And one of the things that's changing people's motivations, and I think is going to be a big deal this year, is that draft decision that was leaked about Roe versus Wade. And it really motivated people. In fact, it's going to motivate more than 38% of people to be more motivated to vote. Now, you know, there's about 58 or 60% that say that they aren't. But of course, this is something where people on the right, they're getting what they want.
Yeah.
Right. On the other side, I think it's going to really activate Democrats and the left to, you know, on the left side of the spectrum to get moving because they have something really at stake.
Yeah.
If you have a change in leadership.
So one of the things that really got me thinking about Roe versus Wade and if it is overturned through the courts is that that's really going to make Democratic voters turn out more because this goes to the state level then. So Democratic voters would want to put in more people
that support their values, right? Because in Michigan, it would become a very draconian law as it is now. Now, there's some court challenges and things, but the law as it is now would become one of the toughest in the nation.
Yeah, like if not the toughest.
Right.
So I think it's going to be really interesting once we get into the election season to see what happens once the court decision comes out, whether or not what's going to happen.
Let's get into schools because this is an interesting one where I think there is a divorcing of perception and reality. If you look at the top line numbers, you know, you've got a situation where nearly 39% of people think that our public schools in Michigan perform the same as other public schools in other states, and 15% think that they're better. So a majority of people think that our schools are better than the same than other states. But the reality is, when you look at the numbers, Michigan schools lag our competitors. So that becomes an issue from a policy perspective. When the public doesn't understand where we actually are at. I find that to be a case in a number of areas where they think, well, their school is okay, right, and they perceive it to be okay. But when you compare it against the nation, it doesn't stand up. I don't know how to get that message out there. You know, and Cheyenne, you're a parent, you're more active in that stuff. What is it that you kind of get the gist that people are thinking around this?
Well, I think one of those things is, like you said, their school might be great, but another school across town isn't great. Right. And one of the things, too, is that they also narrowed it down even more into race. Right. Mm-hmm. So a majority of white parents think that their schools are great, whereas the majority of Black parents do not think it's great.
Interesting. I mean, there are statistics that back that up, right?
Yeah.
Like statistically, schools that serve communities of color aren't as high performers. They're just not. And that's because of funding. That's because of resource issues. That's because of issues dealing with poverty.
Yeah.
All those issues. So that gets in my wider thing of like, if you don't think there's a problem, it's hard to drive energy to solve it. Now, this is not at the policy conference, but I wanted to mention that Thursday night, Bravo Top Chef, Detroit's own Sarah Welch, is a finalist. How exciting is that, Cheyenne?
It is so exciting. One, because it is a woman chef, which is excellent to see. And two, because she's from here, right? She does a lot of great work at Marrow. Mm-hmm. And I'm so excited to see her as a finalist.
Yeah, and it's been fun to watch her throughout the series. So if you get a chance, check it out on Thursday. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know that I'm going to be putting it on the DVR, and I'm going to be trying to get away from spoilers, though I doubt I'll be able to.
Well, just stay away from Twitter, which I know is hard.
I'm at a conference full of Twitterers. I guess I'm screwed.
Well, maybe all of the policy conference tweets will drown out the Bravo stuff. Who knows?
Now, before I get to my conversation, I wanted to take a quick moment and acknowledge the passing of a friend of the show, Clarence Dass, an attorney, somebody who ran for judge He was somebody who passed the age of 36 of colon cancer way too young. He was a guest of the show a while ago. We were talking about immigration, Iraqi immigration, some of the issues that are involved with that. And I remember how kind of a man he was and some of the great words he talked about when it comes to interviews and asking questions that are deeper than other outlets do. And it made something that I felt a lot of pride about. And he was always such a great resource for people. Taken from us too young, and even sadder, days away from the due dates of his twins.
I know.
There's that Billy Joel song, Only the Good Die Young. And I feel like that's the case with Clarence, and it definitely hits me in a way I haven't had a chance to mention on the show until now. But I wanted to make sure to acknowledge that and his family, and just say thank you for all the things that he's done. All right, on the porch of Mackinac, the Michigan Task Force on Women in Sports released initial recommendations after 3 years of work researching and developing strategies to support opportunities in the state for girls and women in sports. Now, I'm going to be talking about stuff in schools, so K-12 education, collegiate, but also the professional level. Kind of leading the charge, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Here's that conversation. Why is this so important to do now? Why do this task force now?
Well, the governor convened our task force in 2019, soon after we were all elected, recognizing that at a time when Michigan became the first state in the country to be led by women in every executive position, except, of course, our wonderful LG, that we wanted to ensure it was more than a moment and that we were investing in the next generation of women leaders. And the best way to do that, we found, and the research shows, was investing in opportunities for women in sports. And so that's what we did. We created this task force with people who were already doing the work in the field, as you heard from today, and listened to them, did research all around the state to identify the inequities. And what we found in particular was that though Title IX set great parameters and expectations, there's been lax enforcement in our state, and that has impeded progress.
So when you talk about lax enforcement, what does that mean?
It means it's not really clear who's enforcing it in a way. And so there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that come in, or the Women's Law Center and others that try to push for enforcement. But time and time again, we felt that if there was an entity in Michigan that was really charged with proactively collecting data and identifying ways that compliance could be improved and working with colleges and schools to advance improvement in Title IX, and then hold those accountable with specific teeth or fines and the like if they're lax in compliance, that would go a lot further ensuring more compliance. We saw also great success stories, Alma College being one of them, and we had the athletic director of Alma College, Sarah Daring, here with us today. She's a tremendous leader nationally for women in sports, but really in visiting her team at Alma, saw really how much women can do as leaders in athletic departments, and particularly for women playing, girls playing sports in those departments.
You're also looking at things at different levels than just within schools. You mentioned in some of the early recommendations about professional sports. That caught my ear because we do a lot of Detroit City FC stuff. Yeah. There's been talk about getting a professional team for the women up and running. What are some of the things that you can do to support professional women's sports?
Well, that's really what the business community can play a role in doing. And that's why we wanted to make a statement here at the Mackinac Policy Conference to say to the business community, you can do stuff too on this, you can lead as well. And in particular, investing in Detroit City FC and the women's soccer team affiliate to ensure that they can ascend to be one part of the perhaps National Women's Soccer League as we hope to see occur. But that takes an ownership group to invest in building a stadium, in building facilities for a professional team. And so it's an effort that requires the community to come together and recognize the importance of this opportunity and really putting Detroit on the map for having a women's soccer team.
The rest of the report comes out in about a month. Is there anything specifically that we need to be looking for with that? Is it going to be more operational in detail? Or?
Yeah, it'll be more about policies and funding and needs. And we looked at opportunities, for example, to create a license plate where people could buy in support of women in sports, and that revenue could go to supporting scholarships for women in sports in Michigan. So we're trying to find ways that everyone can play a role in supporting opportunities for women in sports, because it is something that affects so many of us and really does benefit all of us.
All right, and that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, we'll have more coverage tomorrow and the next day of the things that are happening up here. We've got more stories to talk about, but of course, I want to find the right person to talk to. I know I've got some requests on that whole thing with Mike Duggan and the towing, but I want to get to the right people to talk about that one. So with that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Cheyenne Oserini.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.